You're in a dimly lit room in May 1945. The soft North German evening seeping through a cracked window. The war's dying gasps echo outside. But here, it's the clack of typewriter keys that cuts the silence. You're sitting with John Kenneth Galbraith, a lanky economist with a scholar's calm, his eyes sharp as he faces a man whose name carries the weight of the Reich's last stand. Albert Speer. No shouting, no theatrics, just folders stacked like tombstones, graphs spiking like jagged cliffs, and a film canister reeking of acetate and cold truth. One typewritten line leaps out. 96. Sanbai. That's the number of U.S. military aircraft built in 1944. A figure so vast it seems to shrink the room. Speer reads it, his architect's poise faltering, and you feel the air tighten. Those numbers aren't just ink, they're the pulse of a war machine that drowned Germany's hopes. Plane by plane, rivet by rivet, you're witnessing the moment arithmetic became judgment. The projector hums to life, and you're pulled into flickering monochrome. A Liberator bomber rolls off a U.S. factory line, smooth as a river. One every hour. Ford boasted every 55 minutes. You see workers, men and women, moving like dancers in a choreographed waltz of steel and sparks. The rhythm's hypnotic, relentless. A beat Germany couldn't match. Speer's face betrays him. He knows this isn't just production, it's a tidal wave. Historical records confirm it. The U.S. churned out 96. 318 aircraft in 1944, dwarfing Germany's 39. Babelingti, many of which never left the ground for lack of fuel. You glance at Paul Nitze, the strategist who rushed Speer into this room before Soviet or British interrogators could claim him. His pen hovers, poised like a judge's gavel. As Speer lists Germany's bottlenecks, coal trains stalled, ball bearings scarce, hydrogenation plants in ruins. The contrast is stark. America's factories hummed under open skies, while Germany's hid in forests, bleeding efficiency with every air raid. Let's add a quirky twist. Some U.S. factories ran so smoothly. Workers played swing music to keep morale high. Radios crackling over the din of rivet guns. It's almost comical. Imagining a bomber born to a Benny Goodman riff. But it speaks to a confidence Germany lacked. Historians still argue whether Speer fully grasped the Allies' industrial edge in 1943 or clung to denial until this moment. Did he see the end coming? Or was he blinded by Hitler's promises? You're betting on a mix of both hope warring with math. Joke time. Picture Speer watching that film, muttering, "My graphs never had a soundtrack." You smirk, but the weight of his realization hits you. This isn't just about planes. It's about a war decided not by generals, but by assembly lines. To widen the lens, consider the Soviet Union's role. While Speer faced U.S. numbers, the Red Army's factories were spitting out T-34 tanks at a relentless clip over 28. 0 inches, 1,944 alone. Like the U.S., the Soviets built in safety, far from Luftwaffe bombs. Their production a mirror of America's rhythm. You imagine Speer hearing whispers of Soviet output, another blade in his side. This wasn't just a Western triumph. It was a global industrial vice squeezing the Reich. The broader context sharpens the drama. While Germany scrambled, the Allies, US, Britain, USSR forged a production web that spanned continents. From Detroit's Willow Run to Siberia's tank plants. Japan, too, felt this pressure. Its naval yards outpaced by US shipbuilding. Like Liberty ships, launched in days. You lean closer, the room's chill seeping in, and see Speer's hands trace the U.S. charts. He's not just a war criminal here, he's a man staring at inevitability. The Nuremberg trials will later sentence him to 20 years. Not for ideology, but for enabling a system that enslaved millions. You feel the moral weight, the lives behind those numbers. Joke number 2. Imagine Speer trying to pitch his miracle to Galbraith. Sure, our planes are grounded, but my charts look fantastic. It's grim humor, but it underscores the futility. This moment isn't just about 1,945. It's a lesson echoing into modern conflicts, where drones and supply chains decide victories as much as soldiers. From Vietnam's air campaigns to today's cyber wars, industrial might still writes the ending. The projector clicks off, but the images linger: factories, wings, a sky filled with steel. You're hooked, ready to unravel how Speer got here, how Germany's war machine tried to fight this tidal wave, and why it was doomed from the start. The numbers are speaking, and you're listening. Part 2. You're stepping back from that tense interrogation room, the echo of the projector's hum fading as we dive into the roots of this industrial showdown. It's February 1942. Berlin cloaked in snow, the air thick with smoke from distant bombs. Inside the Reich Chancellery, a young architect named Albert Speer, just 36, receives a promotion that thrusts him into the heart of Germany's war machine. Minister of Armaments and War Production. Hitler's trust in him is ironclad, built on years of designing grand Nazi spectacles. But now, Speer's canvas isn't stone, it's steel, factories, and a crumbling economy. You're watching him pore over production tables that reveal chaos. Workshops duplicating efforts, military branches squabbling like rival firms, plants running at half speed while coal piles up in the wrong yards, ball bearings bottlenecked in Schweinfurt, aluminum diverted to frivolous pots instead of planes. Germany's industrial system isn't a well-oiled machine, it's a tangle of quarrels, inefficiencies born from years of Nazi mismanagement and overconfidence. Speer's first moves are bold. Organizational thunderbolts. He forms committees to streamline, forces firms to share tooling, slashes overlapping aircraft designs. To the public, it's sold as efficiency. To Hitler, as miracles. And for a spell, the numbers climb. Aircraft and tank production surges between 1,942 and 1,944. Fighters peaking in 1944. Propaganda hails Speer as the miracle man. His graphs shields against despair. But peel back the layers, and you see the fragility. This armaments miracle relies on forced labor from occupied lands. Millions enslaved in brutal conditions. Their suffering, the hidden cost of those rising curves. Historical records, including Speer's own diaries, reveal his creeping unease. He tours German plants, seeing men hammering by hand in cramped sheds, wings dangling from rafters like laundry. Cycle times are vague. A fighter takes weeks, a bomber months, dependent on luck, like trains dodging raids or bearings arriving unscathed. Now, let's deepen the analysis. This wasn't just Germany's internal mess, it stemmed from pre-war economic disparities that doomed the Axis from the start. Germany entered the war with a strong but strained base resource pool, reliant on conquests for oil, rubber, and metals. Hitler's blitzkrieg bets assumed quick victories, not a drawn-out slugfest. Contrast that with the US, an industrial giant, untouched by bombs, fed by vast raw materials, oceans of oil from Texas, iron from Minnesota. America's economy was a sleeping behemoth, its factories convertible overnight, from cars to tanks. A quirky, less-known fact. In 1940, U.S. Lend-Lease began funneling aid to Britain and the Soviets, shipping over 14 000 aircraft and 7,000 tanks by war's end, bolstering allies while Germany stretched thin across fronts. Historians debate if Speer's reforms could have bridged this gap. Many argue no, Germany's total war mobilization came too late, unlike the Allies' early shifts. To expand perspective, compare with Britain. Churchill's factories converted swiftly, producing Hurricanes and Spitfires that held the Luftwaffe at bay during the Battle of Britain. But Britain leaned on U.S. aid. Its island status, a shield like America's oceans. Japan's naval yards, meanwhile, churned carriers but faltered against U.S. output. America launched 141 carriers to Japan's 17. You're seeing a pattern. Axis nations underestimated Allied resilience, their economies fragmented by ideology and overextension. Joke time. Imagine Speer envying Henry Ford's setup. We disperse to forests. They build in cathedrals of glass unfair. It's dark humor, but it highlights the inefficiency of hiding production versus open, uninterrupted assembly. The broader World War II canvas sharpens this. Total war economies demanded everything, rationing. Women in factories. Innovation under fire. Germany's initial successes masked flaws. By 1942, as America entered fully, the tide shifted. U.S. plants in Detroit and Seattle retooled in days, not months, a pace Speer dismissed as propaganda at first. Reports of Liberty ships launched in 5 days. German engineers laughed it off as stunts. But even at 2 weeks, it flipped attrition equations. U-boats sank freighters, but America built faster than they could torpedo. You're feeling Speer's dread. Build, he's rationalizing, centralizing, but facing a continent-sized rival. Add in Soviet might. Relocated factories beyond the Urals produced T-34 seconds en masse. Over 80,000 by war's end. Their sloped armor a nasty surprise for panzers. Speer's 1,943 push for total war sounds defiant. But it's a shield, stripping luxuries, conscripting labor, diverting resources. Graphs climb, but behind them, coal shortages ripple, rails disrupt, bombs hollow plants. A mainstream fact. Allied raids on Schweinfurt ball bearings in 1943 slashed German output by 38%, forcing dispersal that cost efficiency. You're in Speer's shoes. Bullying industry, sleeping in offices, but knowing each gain is tactical, not strategic. Pilots die faster than planes replace them. Fuel starves engines. Joke 2. Speer to his staff. We've doubled fighters now. If only we had doubled skies. The sarcasm bites, underscoring the mismatch. This background sets the stage for the drama ahead. Speer's reforms buy time, but against Allied rhythms, they're whispers in a storm. You're hooked on how this industrial chess game unfolds. Where numbers aren't cold, they're the heartbeat of victory and defeat. You're plunging into the thick of it now. The years 1942 to 1944, where Albert Speer wages a desperate industrial war from Berlin's shadowed ministries. Snow melts into spring as Speer tours Germany's aircraft plants, his footsteps echoing in half-lit sheds where men hammer fuselages by hand, rivets flying in narrow confines, wings slung from rafters like forgotten banners. Cycle times drag weeks for a fighter, months for a bomber plagued by bottlenecks. Ball bearings jammed in Schweinfurt, coal trains frozen on tracks, air raids shattering roofs mid-shift. Speer, the architect turned armaments czar, sees the mess and acts. He centralizes, bullies designers to trim redundant projects, disperses factories into forests and hills to evade bombs. Forced labor swells the workforce millions from occupied lands. Their chains, the grim underbelly of his miracle. Production climbs. Fighters double in 1944. Tanks surge. Hitler praises his golden boy. Graphs rising like defiant spikes. But you're sensing the cracks. Speer's diaries whisper unease. He receives reports of U.S. Liberty ships launching in days. Apace German yards mock as propaganda. Yet it's real. One ship in 5 days. Then weeks. Flipping U-boat attrition. By 1943, Speer's total war ramps up luxuries axed. Aluminum from pots to planes. Labor conscripted. The 1,944 Fighter Staff Initiative is his feverish peak. Managers bunk in offices. Production tables like Holy Writ. Churning interceptors at double speed. On paper, success. Germany builds more aircraft than ever. But you're watching the human toll. Pilots perish faster than replacements. Train. Fuel starves engines. Allied raids on hydrogenation plants like Leuna slash synthetic oil by 90% in months. A quirky detail. Some German planes end up patched with wood and canvas. Shortcuts born of desperation. Turning sleek Messerschmitts into fragile hybrids. Let's analyze deeper. Speer's gains are tactical illusions in a strategic abyss. He streamlines. But dispersal costs. Efficiency every truck detour. Every hidden jig lost in transit. Turns minutes into wasted days. Contrast with U.S. Willow Run. A vast hall where B-24 seconds roll out hourly. Workers in sync like a symphony. Overhead cranes groaning under wing spars longer than buses. America's rhythm is the killer buffers deep. Spares. Abundant. Rail spurs hugging the plant. Germany's is fractured. Inspectors hunting cracks by flashlight in smoldering ruins. Historians argue Speer delayed defeat but couldn't reverse it. His centralization echoed Soviet models, but without their vast, safe hinterlands. Add less-known facts. Oh, the 1,943 Schweinfurt-Regensburg raids targeted ball bearings, halving German output temporarily, forcing Speer to scavenge from occupied Europe's stockpiles, a desperate scramble that exposed vulnerabilities. To broaden perspective, compare fronts. On the Eastern Front, Soviet T-34 tanks flood fields over 19. 0 inches, 1,943 alone. Their mass production, a rude shock to panzers, mirroring U.S. aircraft deluge. Japan's shipyards strain against U.S. output. Carriers, emerging piecemeal while America launches fleets. Britain's factories, bolstered by Lend-Lease, churn Spitfires for tactical air superiority. You're seeing a global pattern. Axis improvisation versus Allied scale. Joke time. Speer eyeing U.S. stats. We disperse to caves. They build in daylight cathedrals. Next they'll add coffee breaks. The sarcasm stings, highlighting cultural gaps. German rigidity versus American flexibility. Where car plants flip to bombers overnight. Speer's private memos darken. By 1943, he admits limits U.S. aluminum capacity tenfold. Germany's tire output endless. Texas training fields, graduating more pilots yearly than Germany total. He pitches miracle weapons jets like the Me-262. V-2 rockets but knows they're band-aids. Jets dazzle at double Mustang speed. But guzzle fuel Germany lacks. V-2 seconds terrorize London, yet cost as much as dozens of fighters. Resources squandered on spectacle. You're in Speer's office. Charts on walls. As he bullies industry for cooperation. But each raid erases weeks. Workers exhausted. Repeat motions in dim light. Quality slipping contrast with US lines. Boring in their healthy efficiency. Coolant spraying pale. Torque charts taped above benches. The narrative tension builds. Speer's graphs impress Hitler, but he knows they're defensive. Patching a sinking ship. Pilots fly empty cockpits. Tanks become iron statues without gas. A mainstream event. The 1944 Ardennes offensive drains civilian fuel stocks, prolonging the agony but collapsing in snow. Tanks stranded. You're feeling the momentum shift. Allied skies fill. German fronts starve. This era isn't just production. It's a human drama of denial, where Speer manages harder, but lives in a different world from the Allies' unrelenting beat. You're hurtling toward the peak of this industrial inferno. Late 1944 into early 1945, where the Allies' aerial hammer falls with unyielding force, crippling Germany's lifelines of transport and fuel. The skies over Europe darken not just with winter clouds, but with bomber streams, thousands of B-17 seconds, B-24 seconds, Lancasters pummeling rail yards, bridges, and synthetic oil plants. Albert Speer, once the miracle man, now paces bombed-out factories. His memos to Hitler screaming warnings. Coal shortages paralyze lines. Rail disruptions freeze assembly. Fuel evaporates like morning mist. The transportation plan, a precision Allied strategy, shifts from scatterbombing cities to surgical strikes on bottlenecks. A single raid on Hamburg's rail hub obliterates 120 wagons. Craters visible from miles up. You're imagining the chaos. Twisted tracks in Cologne. Stranded barges on canals. Locomotives rusting in Leipzig sidings. Germany's arteries bleed out. And Speer watches his production graphs mock him tanks built but immobile. Planes assembled but grounded. The drama intensifies, with fuel as the fatal wound. May 1944 raids on Leuna and Politz synthetic plants slash output by 90%, turning Germany's oil lifeline to a trickle. Speer calls fuel the lifeblood of war, and the Allies drain it dry. Panzer divisions crawl miles before stalling. Luftwaffe squadrons idle on runways. Pilots drilling in cockpits without takeoff. A Kirky reversal. By 1945, two-thirds of Wehrmacht transport reverts to horses. A modern army dragged back to Napoleonic era, wagons creaking under shells. Soldiers trudging like ghosts of 1812. Historians debate if this was Speer's greatest failure. His dispersal saved factories but exposed transport. A vulnerability Allied planners exploited ruthlessly. You're in Speer's shoes during the Ardennes offensive. December 1944, Hitler's last gasp. Draining civilian fuel stocks. Tanks rolling briefly through snow, only to strand. The bulge collapsing in frozen futility. Let's rework for depth. This climax isn't just destruction. It's the unraveling of Speer's illusions. His internal storm raging as memos clash with Hitler's denial. He knows by mid-1944 the war's mathematically lost U.S. aluminum 10 times Germany's. Endless tires, keeping convoys rolling, but he manages on, promising jets and V-2 seconds. The Me-262 jets dazzle at 500 miles per hour, but guzzle scarce fuel. Their runways bombed to craters. V-2 seconds rain terror on London. Yet each costs dozens of fighters' worth. Resources squandered on spectacle. Speer's defiance flickers. He secretly halts scorched earth orders, preserving bridges for a post-war Germany. A quiet rebellion against the Führer's rage. Joke time. Speer to Hitler. Our jets are miracles now, if only miracles ran on water. The bitterness cuts, underscoring desperation. Compare fronts for perspective. In Normandy, the transportation plan's genius shines bridges over the Seine demolished, isolating German reinforcements, allowing D-Day beaches to hold. P-47 Thunderbolt strafe convoys, turning roads to graveyards. A tactical air dominance, mirroring Pacific island hopping, where U.S. carriers and logistics choke Japanese garrisons. Soviet advances on the East grind similarly. TV-Rendertic floods overwhelming despite German ingenuity. Britain's mosquito bombers add night precision, their wooden frames evading radar, compounding the Reich's nightmare. You're seeing a unified Allied strategy. Not just bombs, but a web-strangling mobility, a mainstream event. The Rhine crossings in March 1945. Bridges rebuilt by U.S. engineers in hours, while German repairs take weeks. Flexibility, trumping rigidity. The human drama peaks. Soldiers in the Hürtgen forest abandon heavy weapons for lack of fuel, marching with rifles like defeated phantoms. Civilians queue for bread in Berlin. Diaries whispering, "The sky rumbles day and night tomorrow. Worse." Speer tours Dusseldorf. Wreckage. Stepping over charred rails. Muttering, "We build for ghosts." His confrontation with Hitler boils. Charts show fuel at 3% of 1,943 levels. But the Führer rages. Defeatist. You feel the tension Speer's loyalty fracturing. Knowledge tormenting without power. Add less-known details. Forced laborers repair rails under fire. Striped uniforms in lantern light. Only for raids to undo it all. Joke 2. A German pilot. We practice takeoffs on the ground. At least no crashes. Grim levity amid despair. This climax is the breaking point. Illusions shatter as transport collapses. Fuel vanishes. The Reich twitches but dies. You're breathless, ready for the fallout trials, reflections, and lessons etched in history's steel. You're emerging from the storm of 1944 to 1945, the Allies' industrial vice tightening until the Reich cracks. The immediate aftermath unfolds in the rubble of Europe. May 1945. Silence, blanketing battlefields where once engines roared. Albert Speer, captured and interrogated. Faces not just captors, but his own arithmetic charts spread in Luxembourg rooms, revealing tanks produced but unfueled, planes built but pilotless. U.S. officers marvel, a giant with no blood. One says, as Speer admits, factories churned into emptiness. This reckoning isn't abstract. It's etched in Nuremberg's courtroom, where Speer stands trial in 1946. Sentenced to 20 years, not for fanaticism, but for enabling war's machinery, including forced labor that killed millions. His memoir, polished yet piercing. Confess. We produced for ghosts. Omissions swirling controversy. But his words underscore production's pivotal role in Allied victory numbers, not as boasts, but as the quiet executioner of Axis dreams. Retain the original's essence. The war's last verdicts summarized in whispers, not shouts. Speer's graphs, prisons of his own making. He knew by 1943 the tide irreversible, yet managed on. Torment in knowledge, without power. Post-war. This industrial truth reshapes Europe. Ruins demand reconstruction. The U.S. Marshall Plan injecting $13 billion from 1948, rebuilding factories, rails, and hope in Western Europe. A quirky fact. Former enemies like Germany receive aid. Ford plants retooled for peace, symbolizing how wartime production pivots to prosperity, averting communism's spread. Deeper analysis. This wasn't charity. It countered Soviet influence, sparking Cold War arms races where US-Soviet factories mirror World War II's dual B-52 seconds versus MiGs. ICBMs in silos, like hidden assembly lines. Historians argue the plan's success stemmed from lessons in logistics. Just as transport paralysis felled Germany, aid flows revive economies. GDP soaring 35% in recipient nations by 1951. Long-term impacts ripple globally. World War II births the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower's 1961 warning echoing Speer's hubris economies entangled in perpetual readiness. U.S. defense budgets ballooning to $800 billion today. Compare Vietnam. U.S. air power drops more bombs than World War II totals. Yet, logistics falter in jungles. Ho Chi Minh Trail evading strikes like German dispersals, proving industrial might needs strategic fit. Modern drone warfare amplifies this U.S. predators in Afghanistan or Ukraine, where supply chains decide more than boots. Echoing 1,944 skies occupied by Mustangs. Ethical costs haunt. Speer's system enslaved 12 million. Deaths in camps like Mittelbau-Dora, building Foy Secunda. A stain on efficiency's altar. Total war's toll, 50 million dead, emphasizes human price. From Rosie the Riveter's liberating women to Hiroshima's shadow. Industrial superiority reshaping society. Gender roles. And morality. You're reflecting on soldiers' stories. A German private abandons a Tiger tank for fuel lack, becoming a steel statue. Allied GIs seize bunkers with guns but no ammo. Joke time. Speer in prison. My miracle. Turning steel into regrets. Dark. But it captures the pivot from production to penance. Broader significance. This war proves economies win conflicts. Not just armies' lessons in Korea's stalemates or Gulf War's precision logistics. Post-war. UN forms. Geneva Conventions tighten. But arms races persist. Nuclear deterrence, like frozen World War II graphs. Ethical reflections deepen. Forced labor's legacy in Holocaust memorials. Reminding how efficiency masks atrocity. Shaping 20th century horrors from gulags to genocides. The human element lingers. Civilians in Berlin queue for phantom bread. Diaries whispering defeat before surrender. Speer's sentence in Spandau becomes meditation books written. Regret paused. Add reworked content. Marshall Plans ripple to Asia. Inspiring Japan's economic miracle. U.S. aid rebuilding Toyota from bomber ruins. Comparisons widen. In World War II Pacific, U.S. shipbuilding overwhelms Japan's carriers. Logistics-starving islands, like German fronts. Vietnam flips the script. U.S. industrial flood meets guerrilla evasion. Logistics. Quagmires costing victory. Today, drone swarms in Yemen or Ukraine highlight supply supremacy. Cyber hacks targeting factories like digital Schweinfurt raids. This phase isn't closure. It's transformation ruins birthing NATO. Warsaw Pact. A bipolar world where industrial ghosts haunt. You're seeing how Speer's defeat fuels progress. Ethical reckonings spawn human rights. Industrial lessons. Birth. Silicon Valley innovations. Joke 2. Germany's miracle weapons. Ours were spreadsheets. It underscores the shift arithmetic over ideology. Shaping a century where power flows from forges, not just fields. The significance endures. In every modern conflict, World War II's industrial echo warns underestimate economics. And empires fall. Part 6. You're standing amid the ashes of 1945 Europe. The war's thunder silenced. Convoys rumbling through ruins as civilians emerge from shelters. their faces etched with exhaustion and fragile hope. Albert Speer's reckoning lingers like smoke his charts. Once shields of illusion, now confessions in ink. The Reich he armored with steel dissolves into dust. A 1,000-year empire crumbling in weeks. Berlin streets, shattered stone and empty echoes, whisper the final truth. Numbers, impartial and relentless, judged the war. Speer, in Spandau's cold cell, pens memoirs that blend sobriety with omissions. Admitting, "We were engineers building castles in smoke." His 20-year sentence at Nuremberg isn't just punishment, it's history's mirror, reflecting how production's arithmetic overrode ideology's fire. You're left pondering. In this silence, what endures? Not just victory's monuments, but lessons forged in factories. Warnings for worlds yet to come. Echo the original's poignant close. The war ends not with miracles, but with the hush of factories without power, tanks without fuel, skies without defenders. Speer's ghostly walk through American assembly lines via films, photos, graphs reveals the chasm. Rhythm over chaos, abundance over scarcity, but weave in survivor tales for memorability. A Detroit riveter, his hair tied back, recalls shifts birthing B 24 seconds to swing tunes. Each plane a piece of her soul soaring to free Europe. Contrast with a German forced laborer in Mittelbau Dora. Surviving V, 2 caves where thousands perished. His whisper, "We built rockets that flew, but buried our brothers." These voices humanize the math war's cost, not in abstract digits, but in lives welded to steel. A Kirky legacy. Willow Run. Wartime behemoth. Repurposes post-war into auto plants, symbolizing how destruction births renewal. Cars rolling where bombers once did. Deeper reflection ties it all. This isn't mere history. It's a blueprint for power's perils. Industrial superiority reshaped the 20th century, birthing the military-industrial complex where economies entwine with arsenals. Eisenhower's farewell echoing Speer's hubris. Long-term, Cold War arms races mirror World War II U.S. Minuteman missiles versus Soviet SS-22s. Factories racing in shadows. Lessons in Vietnam. U.S. drops 7 million tons of bombs, outproducing North Vietnam. Yet, logistics snag in Yungles. Ho Chi Minh Trail, a resilient vein defying air power like German dispersals. Modern echoes in drone swarms over Yemen or Ukraine, where supply chains chips from Taiwan. Batteries from China decide fates more than fronts. Ethical shadows loom. Spears enslaved millions spotlight total war's morality, influencing Geneva Conventions and human rights charters, yet persisting in sweatshops fueling today's tech wars. Compare globally. Pacific Theater's U.S. shipbuilding overwhelms Japan. Logistics starving Iwo Jima like German Ardennes. Britain's wartime factories, rationed yet resilient. Pivot to welfare states post-war. NHS, born from Blitz solidarity. Soviet 32 floods crush Wehrmacht, but at Gulag costs. Foreshadowing Stalin's Iron Curtain. You're seeing patterns. Underestimate economic might, and empires falter Rome's roads. Britain's navy. Now, cyber grids. Joke time. Speer time travels to a drone factory. My jets were fast, yours fly themselves, cheaters. Lightens the gravity, but underscores innovation's march. From rivets to AI. The broader lesson resonates. Resilience trumps rigidity. Allies open societies flexed women riveting. Immigrants forging while Nazi bureaucracy choked on ideology. Post-war Marshall Plan revives Europe. $13 billion seeding democracies. Averting Weimar. repeats. Impacts cascade. Japan's economic miracle. Toyota rising from bomber ruins. Germany's Wirtschaftswunder. Speer's successors building Volkswagens. Not V2 seconds. Yet warnings persist. Climate wars loom. Where resource scarcity, water. Rare earths mirrors World War II oil chokes. Industrial edges deciding survival. Ethical reckonings evolve. Nuremberg's justice inspires ICC, holding leaders accountable for war's enablers. From arms dealers to cyber hackers. Poignant stories seal it. A U.S. pilot rotated home after missions. Contrasts with German aces flying till death, abundance saving souls. A Berlin child sketches planes instead of flowers. Sky's scars, her childhood. Speer's quiet defiance, halting scorched earth hints at redemption. Preserving for peace, what war twisted. Joke 2, Germany's final weapon. Denial more explosive than V2 seconds. Grim chuckle, but it captures clinging illusions costing lives. In this memorable close, you're cold to remember. History's industrial shadows lurk in today's factories. Supply chains whispering warnings. Underestimate them, and new empires rise or fall. The arithmetic endures. A silent judge in steel and silence.